Hello, this is Jen Wood, and today I would like to invite you to practice with me on another Mindfulness Monday. And today I would like to offer the practice which comes from the Mindful Self-Compassion training, and this is called taking a self-compassion break. And taking a self-compassion break can be really useful when we're feeling difficult emotions, if we're feeling unwell physically, if we're anxious about anything, even if we're feeling overwhelmed or just don't quite know how to navigate this period of coming out of lockdown and just facing things that we haven't faced for a while, like meeting up with more people and maybe going back to work. Thinking about the kids going back to school, whatever you're thinking about. It's possible that you've been, like me, in a bit of a bubble over the last few months, and perhaps it feels quite scary even to think about going back out. And what we know is that the more we meet our difficulty and the more that we settle that difficulty without judging ourselves for it, without making it wrong, without forcing ourselves not to feel it, without numbing it down with all the things that we numb with, self-medicate with. It can really, really help to boost our immune system. The more we soothe ourselves, the better our immune system functions, the better our whole system functions. So the self-compassion break has 3 parts. And the first part is just that we meet the difficulty, and we'll do this together, but I'd like to explain the 3 parts first. The first part is we just meet the difficulty, we name it to tame it. And the second part is that we acknowledge this reality that there is suffering in life, that as human beings we all suffer, and perhaps most importantly, we will all be suffering in the same way as someone else in the world, maybe someone really close to you. So we're not alone in our suffering, even our particular flavor of suffering, it will be shared by someone. And sometimes when we feel like we're anxious or we're depressed or we're lonely or we're feeling isolated, or just we feel in despair about something, overwhelmed about something, it feels like we're so alone in our suffering that there's really no one else that feels this way. There's no one else that understands us. And that can really kind of create this negative feedback loop, which becomes a negative spiral, which means that we feel worse and worse. So just that feeling of connection, of like normalizing how we're feeling, it can help our nervous system to settle. And thirdly, we just imagine that our suffering part is sitting next to us, and we soothe that part in exactly the way that that part of us needs to be soothed. So shall we practice together? So I welcome you and invite you to just settle into wherever you're sitting or lying or even standing, wherever it's safe to do this practice. And if you have your feet on the floor, really feel your feet connected to the floor. And imagine these roots growing out of the soles of your feet, just like these beautiful trees behind me, really helping you to feel rooted and grounded and connected. Noticing all the parts of your body that are connected to whatever you're sitting on or lying on. And just turning your attention into the breath. And you can choose to close down your eyes or soften your gaze. And just gently following the breath into the body and out. We're not trying to change the breath here. We're just using the breath as a light and gentle support for our attention. Noticing our tendency to get distracted by thoughts, hooked by thoughts, dragged away by thoughts. And if that happens, just noticing and maybe smiling when you notice. Really congratulating yourself for noticing, smiling, and just coming back to the breath with your attention. And as you do that, just checking in for a minute with your posture and just seeing if it's possible to drop your shoulders a bit, to bring a little bit more openness to your chest. Imagine there's a thread coming out of the top of your head, just pulling you up, and perhaps just very slightly bringing your chin up. So you feel like you're growing. And back to your breath. And as we move into the practice, now that we've set ourselves up for the practice, just noticing something which feels difficult. Perhaps for this practice, because we're learning, perhaps choosing something that isn't too intensely difficult. Maybe if you think about a scale of 0 to 10, maybe we're looking at a 3, maybe a 4 max. And just noticing what that difficulty is. We're just going to label this difficulty. It might be frustration at my partner. It might be a sense of loss. Maybe an awareness of being a bit critical to ourselves. And as you notice that feeling, just silently in your mind's eye, just see if you can label that feeling, just like you're taking a post-it note and you're writing that feeling down, and you're just going to say it to yourself. This feels like frustration. And as you name it, and you can say it out loud if you like, as you name it, just notice how it feels. Continue to breathe. Notice what's happening in your body. And just say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. This anxiety, this frustration, this loss, it feels like suffering. It feels hard. And notice where it is in your body, where you have a sensation of this feeling in your body, physical sensation, a resonance. For me, it feels just here in the middle of my chest and the bottom of my throat. And so the invitation here is to put your hand over that area that you might feel that suffering. Some people also like to put another hand over their tummy. And if you don't feel an area, then maybe put your hand over your heart and your tummy, or just over your heart. But for me, this feels good. It feels soothing. And just breathe into that area. Just seeing if you can create some more space to just feel that feeling. Rather than suppress it, rather than avoid it, rather than ignore it, just allow yourself, give yourself permission to feel for a moment. And now we move to the second part. You can keep your hand where it is if it feels good. And just reminding yourself that suffering is one of the things that makes us human, this capacity to feel emotions. And although it feels really uncomfortable sometimes, the alternative, like not feeling any emotions, would be, for me, much worse. For most people, much worse. Remembering that you're not alone, we're not alone in our feeling, in our suffering. We all suffer. And just perhaps think about people who care about you, surrounding you. Maybe they're putting their hands on your shoulders or your back. And they're letting you know that you're not alone in your suffering. You might even get a sensation of leaning back into their hands and just feeling supported. And if it feels difficult to imagine anyone that might support you, perhaps imagining all the people in the world who might be suffering in the same way. And imagine them just surrounding you. Perhaps it's a small circle, perhaps it's a huge circle. And all of these people are just letting you know that you're not alone in your suffering. We all suffer. You're not alone. And moving into the third stage of the practice, and just thinking about that part of you that really is feeling this difficulty, is feeling this pain, is feeling this anxiety, this depression, this loss, and seeing if you can imagine that part as a part of you sitting next to you. And we're imagining that part of us because we know that there is an innate sense of self within us that can rise above all suffering, can soothe the parts of us that do suffer. But thinking now for a moment of that part that's suffering, and thinking about how we would soothe ourselves, how we would soothe that part. What would we say? We might say, it's okay, this feeling will pass. Just keep breathing, that's something I might say. Keep feeling your feet against the ground. Feel your seats. Feel your breath. Know that you're connected and supported. Know that you're not alone. Know that this will pass. And perhaps thinking about how you would like to feel instead. And imagine that you're breathing that in. Self-compassion, love, warmth, support, whatever you need, strength, courage. Breathe it all in. And every time you breathe out, you release some of that feeling that doesn't feel good, until you feel a tiny shift or a bigger shift. And trusting that it will improve, it will pass, and you're not alone. So just bringing your hands down if you still have them up, bringing your sensation back into your feet and your hands, wiggling your fingers, wiggling your toes. If you do have your eyes closed, just preparing to open your eyes, and finally opening your eyes, and welcome back.